This is Wednesday, April the 7th. This is American history. The United States had the atomic bomb. We had dropped 2 on Japan during World War II. We had many more. President Truman decided to take the atomic energy out of the hands of the military and put it into the hands of the Atomic Energy Commission. That's where the atomic energy is today. During Truman's first term, Winston Churchill, former Prime Minister of Great Britain, was invited to speak at Westminster College in Fulton, Missouri. He was asked to speak on a matter of foreign policy. Churchill is going to speak about what he called the threat of communism, what he called an Iron Curtain. This is part of Churchill's famous Iron Curtain speech. Now, President Truman is going to develop a foreign policy that deals with the Soviets and those countries who are part of the Soviet sphere. Now, it comes in 2 parts. In either part, the threat of nuclear war is unwinnable. Neither side can win. And so Truman begins to think of this from a different angle. One is called the Truman Doctrine. Now, I like to think of the Truman Doctrine as the stick in the carrot and the stick. You can get the donkey to walk by swatting him with the stick on the behind, or you can get the donkey to walk by dangling a carrot out in front of him. This is the stick. Truman said in the Truman Doctrine that he would give weapons to any country that is fighting communism. A very good example would be Greece. Now, when Greece was taken over by the Nazis, both the Soviets and the British will come to drive the Nazis out. In those areas where the Soviets had driven the Nazis out, they're looking to form a communistic government. But the vast majority of Greece was given freedom by the British. Truman will give weapons to the Greek government so that they can throw the communists out. But the second part is the carrot part. The carrot part was developed by George Marshall. Now, George Marshall, who had been in charge of the Army, is now Secretary of State. And Marshall proposes the Marshall Plan. Now, the Marshall Plan says that the United States will give non-military aid to any nation as long as they hold free elections. So, Germany, we're going to give the Germans things that will make Germany rebuild if they hold free elections. From June of 1948 to July of 1949, the Soviets are going to try to stop movement of the former Allies into Berlin. Now, Germany had been divided into 4 parts, and Berlin sat in the Soviet section. But Berlin had been divided into 4 parts, and the Soviets decided to close all roads, close all railroads, close all canals that went into Berlin. But they forgot about the air. For over a year, the Allies are going to airlift anything and everything that might be necessary for a city to survive in by air. Food, medicine, clothing, anything that might be necessary. The Berlin airlift was the first attempt by the United States to curtail or stop communism. After World War II, the question was, what are we going to do about those Jews who survived the Holocaust? For the most part, their homes had been destroyed. An idea was brewed that maybe we should create a Jewish state in the Middle East, where Israel had been during biblical times. Now, during the war, this area was called Palestine. And the British and the Americans are going to go to the UN and called for Palestine to be given over to the Jews and renamed Israel. Well, nobody asked the Palestinians, and the Palestinians are most upset. Israel is proclaimed a nation, but in 1948, the United States is going to agree that Israel is a nation, and this is going to cause a controversy in Truman's cabinet. Truman was for having Israel an independent country. Secretary of State Marshall was against it. As Truman signs the papers, Marshall will resign from office. Now, this is what this video is about. This video is about Marshall and Truman and the interaction over Israel. From 1948 to 1970, the Arab countries are going to fight a series of wars to drive these Israelis out. None of the wars will be successful. Well, the year is 1948. It is time for a presidential election. The Republicans are going to turn to Thomas Dewey. Dewey had lost to Roosevelt in the 1944 election. The Democrats are torn. Progressive Democrats believe that Henry Wallace, who had been Secretary of Agriculture under Roosevelt, should be the presidential nominee. Wallace was a progressive, and he felt that many of Roosevelt's ideas had not been carried out. On the other side of the coin, we have conservatives. The conservatives favor Strom Thurmond, who is governor of the state of South Carolina. Thurmond is going to call for segregation to continue and segregation be brought back into the military. Well, the mainstream Democrats decided to go with Truman, and Truman will almost immediately begin to blame all the problems of the world on the do-nothing 80th Congress, which is predominantly Republican. In the election, Strom Thurmond is going to start a third party called the Dixiecrat Party. Now, most politicians said that Truman didn't have a chance because with the southern states not voting for him, there was no way he could win the election. The only person who believed that Truman could win was Truman. Truman will begin a whistle-stop campaign where his train will stop at every little podunk town there is. Truman will come on the back of the train, as you can see here. He will introduce his wife, he will introduce his daughter, and then he will lay into Dewey and the do-nothing 80th Congress. Now, pollsters predicted that it would be an easy victory for Dewey. In fact, all during October and November, they didn't even bother to poll anymore. The world was shocked when Harry Truman won this election. Now, of course, when newspapers get ready to make editions, they make up two editions. One that says this guy won and the other one that says that guy won. Well, in Chicago, the wrong edition was put out on the streets. As you can see, a smiling Harry Truman holding it in his hand. Now, the other paper, the one that's in the lower right-hand corner, this is the actual paper that can be seen in the Truman Library in Independence, Missouri. This video here talks about this election. The blue states are Mr. Dewey, the brownish color states are Mr. Truman, and the greenish color states are Mr. Thurmond. You can see in popular votes, it is an easy Truman victory. However, in electoral college votes, and that's where it counts, it is a very, very, very close election. It was during this time when Joe McCarthy, a senator from the state of Wisconsin, will begin to claim that communists had infiltrated our United States government. Senator McCarthy, a Republican, is going to ask the Republican majority leader in the Senate to allow him to create a special committee. Now, the special committee becomes known as McCarthy's Communistic Committee. And McCarthy is going to bring in person after person after person to interrogate on live TV. Now, this here is a video about the McCarthy hearings when he is going to challenge the Army. The United States House also had a committee looking for communists. This was led by Chairman Richard Nixon from California. Now, whereas McCarthy never really found any communists to speak of, Richard Nixon is going to find some in what he calls the Alger Hiss affair. Now, Alger Hiss worked in the United States State Department during the Roosevelt and now in the Truman years. He was accused by this man, Whittaker Chambers, of taking out State Department secrets, putting them into a pumpkin patch in Maryland, where Whittaker Chambers, who said he was a communist, would pick up the microfilm and take it to a contact in New York City. Well, Whittaker Chambers is going to lay this out for Nixon's House Un-American Activities Committee. Alger Hiss is going to be called. And Alger Hiss says that he did not give away any secrets. But Alger Hiss was guilty of lying before Congress. And Hiss will be sent to prison. Now, Hiss is still very much alive and still very much opposed to what Nixon had said. It was during the time period of looking for Soviet spies that we hear the story of Julius and Ethel Rosenberg. Both had worked on the Manhattan Project. Both had taken atomic secrets and given them to the Soviets. They said the Soviets were our allies. This allowed the Soviets to get a head start. They were both found guilty, and they will both die together in a New York prison in the electric chair. The House Un-American Activities Committee will begin to hunt for communists in everyday life. Now, the committee is going to ruin many lives and many innocent Americans. Probably the person who is most famous to be caught is Dalton Trumbo. He's the gentleman with the glasses. Dalton Trumbo was the most successful screenwriter in Hollywood. He was making fabulous sums of money. He was winning awards left and right. Now, Trumbo acknowledged that he was a member of the Communist Party in the 1930s. But when Trumbo was asked to say who other communists were, Trumbo refused. Trumbo will be indicted by the House Un-American Activities Committee and sent to prison. Soon, Trumbo and 10 other members of the Academy will be blacklisted. This is what we call the Hollywood tip. Now, Trumbo is the leading light. Trumbo will be sent to jail for a couple of years. When he gets out, Trumbo will assume a new name, and he will win 2 Academy Awards under assumed names. This here is an interview that Dalton Trumbo gave after he was released from prison. Well, I think this is probably a pretty good chance for us to break. Tomorrow we're going to look at the war in Korea. So make sure that you bring your map of Korea.